Hello, pursuers. We are back with another episode of the Pursuit of Happiness podcast. I'm your lovely podcast host, Nas Kazimi. Before I get into today's episode, it's going to be about the ladies of London, the new reign. I just wanted to welcome all the new listeners. How are you guys doing? Thank you so much for following. Don't forget to share the podcast, rate it, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I know you're probably already following, so you've subscribed. So, also, I have all my socials up and running for the podcast. Facebook is popping, TikTok is popping, Instagram is popping. It's at the Pursuit of Happiness pod. I'm also on X. X is a little bit, X is X, but still good nonetheless. I'm on Threads. Whichever platform you're on, come follow, come join the conversation. I love that we can build a community. I appreciate you trusting me to help build that community. And whether you're a man, woman, alien, and by alien, I mean like from extraterrestrial. I'm not trying to pinpoint people that are, immigration statuses here. I just want to say that I'm so grateful that you're here. I majority talk about, my favorite shows. I created this podcast because I'm ADHD. I can't just talk about one thing the whole time. So thank God there's tons of shows to go over. But at the same time, I sometimes answer pursuer questions, which I will be doing an episode actually next on that. I talk about bodybuilding because I bodybuild. I talk about everything. But yes, majority of my content is reality TV related, I would say, because I'm a connoisseur of it. I'm ADHD, so I just become obsessed. And and part of my ADHD brain tries to relate it to things that I experience in my life as well. And I don't have friendships like I see on TV. So it's really fascinating to me, and I love breaking it down. And I just love to make it relatable to me. So I thank you so much for joining me in that conversation. Love to hear what you have to say. If you have questions, if you want me to answer anything, if you just want me to touch on anything, please DM. Again, you can find me on my socials. They're all in the show notes. Anyways, let's get into the Ladies of London. Loved Ladies of London. I thought it was such a great show. I'm going to be doing 3-episode recap. It's not really long. My recaps, if you have been listening from the beginning of the podcast, I would literally go through every scene that's happened, but I was like, you know what, that's time consuming, and then I didn't enjoy that. So I just kind of go through main points so I can break it down and kind of comment on things that I see socially that are a bit weird. So let's get started. All the ladies and Mark head to Longleat. So this is that episode. Emma is organizing it, and Micah is organizing the rides. In the car, Lottie decides to ask Mark about the situation between him and Margo. Now, Mark says in England, they rarely talk about their emotions, and when they do, they use humor to deflect. We all know someone that's British or know someone that's from the UK, or and we always use the term, and I'm Canadian, so we have a Commonwealth tie to the Brits, okay? So we get a lot of Aussies here, especially I'm close to Whistler, I'm from Vancouver. A lot of British people here. A lot of people that I know moved out there as well. We always say, the Brits have a dry sense of humor, or like, oh, that was British humor. Like we use these slangs here all the time. So I can see that now. And Mark is kind of right. He's right when he says that not all compliments are sincere, but in England, they're kind and they're nice to everyone when they see them. Unlike Canada and the US, now I'm throwing this part in. Unlike Canada and the US, they don't like you unless they're super uber fake. They don't keep it classy. They wear their heart on their sleeve. They don't say hi to you. They ignore you. They side-eye you, and they stare you down. Now, if you're the type of person that's like, that's not me and my friend group, or that's not the way I am, if I don't like you, I'll still be a little bit polite. Or you could be like, I can't be fake. I get it. I can't be fake either. But I think there's a degree of, you have to you can't walk into, like, for example, a supermarket and see somebody that you don't like and be like, fuck this guy, man. I'm not going to talk to this person. Forget it. Like, I'm going to stay. Like, you're out in public. Like, there's just a level of respect that you have to kind of showcase when you're out in public, and it's not a reflection on the other person, it's a direct reflection on you. So there's these things that, here's Micah's word, etiquette, that I think sometimes when you have hatred or disdain for somebody, you forget. Understandable. Listen, this is the part that I love when I relate everything back to me. Not because I want to make it about me, but because I like to make it relatable. That's how my brain processes. Or else if these shows, you guys, are not relatable, I would not be watching them. I'd be like, I don't understand what the hell's going on. This is so relatable because I was a crazy reactive person in my 20s. I didn't give a shit. I didn't give a fuck. I didn't give a hoot where I was and how I was disturbing the peace. I didn't care because I was selfish and all I thought about was myself. Now, you can have a difference of opinion in me. We can agree to disagree, but I feel like even when you dislike somebody, there's a level of how much you have to keep it together because you are in the public. Like, you're not in the wild. This isn't, in Africa in some jungle, okay? This isn't the Amazon. It's humans, and you're interacting in a public space amongst other humans. And as much as you don't like somebody, you just either get up and you move, and you don't stand close to them and be seen near them, or don't have their energy spill onto you. But hating somebody and just using energy to put onto them and to make them feel a certain way takes up so much of your own energy. And at 42 years old, I've learned this. So now I'm totally opposite. And that might even be wrong too, to be completely opposite of hating. I would say indifferent. But like, as you get older, a lot more things you let go, and a lot less things trigger you to a point that you have to act out in public, right? Sometimes people learn this a lot earlier in life, and sometimes they learn it a lot later. I just learned it a lot later. So back to Ladies of London. I totally digressed there. Even in America, where you have people that can walk into a room and be fake as fuck. You do. You have it everywhere. But what I saw and what I could understand Mark saying is that here we put on a face. We don't want to ruin the time. I mean, how many times have you seen housewives where they walk in and two people ignore each other? Or now they have completely set. Let's relate this to all of us, New Jersey. Like, could they not have just put it aside? And if not, because obviously they didn't, they've been on pause for 3 years, it got to a point where they couldn't have because they allowed it to a point that it affected their paycheck. They couldn't even work together. And as we know, for some of our favorite housewives or reality shows, it's work. For us, it's like our entertainment. Like, hello, how are you effing with our entertainment? They couldn't even put it aside so they could film a show so we could have Jersey for the next 3 years. No, they couldn't. So this is where I understood Mark. And I was like, you know what? He's correct. Like, just put on a face, make the scene, make the event pleasurable, and all these other things can be dealt with either one-on-one or just not at that time, And as much as I love Mark, his conversation about deflecting with humor was definitely a projection of how he deals with uncomfortable situations, as we see as it goes on. He does not like confrontation. He avoids it or deflects it with passive-aggressive comments. Listen, I'm saying this and I love Mark. I'm just from observing. This is what I've noticed of him. And Margo, on the other end, wants the American way. She wants that way to be the correct way. Where they get into a ring, they spit it out, they fight it out, they box it out until it's resolved. It's just different forms of conflict resolution. And every single person on this planet has a different way of resolving conflict. When I come to an issue, I want to talk about it right then and there. I cannot hold it in. It festers in my brain. And I think people that know me the most know that that is the way I am. So when they try to be petty with me, they'll give me the silent treatment, which I absolutely hate. Whereas I know other people that need to be left alone. And I respect that. I'm like, okay, if that person needs their space, I'm going to give them their space. And when they're ready to chat, they will reach out. And then sometimes they don't. I'm like, what the heck? But if it gets to that point, it's very easy to me to be like, okay, so obviously you respect that I need some sort of conversation around this issue. And my closest friends, we converse, we talk about it right away. Because the longer you let it fester, then everyone's making up scenarios in their brains, they're making up stories, and they're going with those stories. And then it becomes a problem that's not even there, but that everyone believes is there, you know? So, is any way right or is any way wrong? No. But I think that as you get into these friendships, relationships, work, colleague situationships, you start to, especially as a boss. I keep saying this story, but I was the general manager at a Gold's Gym. So I had my personal trainer staff. I had the members, right, which are the people that come in to use the gym. I had the sales consultants, which we called them fitness consultants. I had the other managers that I had to deal with. Then I had upper management that I had to deal with. You learn how everyone kind of deals with stress, pressure, conflict resolution. If a member is mad, you learn. You even learn about the different members, you know? And I think that was the point in my life, which was in my mid to late 30s. So I think from 35 to 40, even before that, 30, I think it was mid 30s to, like 34 to like 38, I realized when I was in that position that I can actually get what I want as a manager as long as I mold to how people behave. Because if they're more reactionary than me, and I'm looking at it from the outside in, it's easy for me to kind of adapt to how they're acting. Now, if I'm the one that's heated, it's not going to work out so well. And I'm the manager and everyone has a recording device, so I can't act out because everyone's going to whip up their phone. Look at the general manager of Gold's Gym. Look at the way that she's acting, you know? But these are just very insightful things to observe from the outside now that I'm not in those situations anymore and be like, yeah, this is conflict resolution and this is how each individual person deals with it, right? Unfortunately, they're both thinking that their way is right. So right now, it needs a cooling off period. But unfortunately, they're filming for a show and they don't get that space. They just keep getting put into these situations where they're in front of each other and there's a huge elephant in the room. And now it's going to spill out onto the other cast members, right? What it really comes down to at this point, actually, is if each party wants to understand the others and meet each other halfway. And if not, it's never going to work. The friendship will never work. Now, when they arrived at Longleat, Mark did exactly what he said that they do in England. He still greeted Margo, complimented, and rightfully so. Didn't want to create an awkward moment at Emma's event. Now, Margo reacted the American way, like she says. Not that she was intending on to, I don't think, but like, you know, what the American way is, like a little bit more like wearing her heart on her sleeve. Like she had a little bit more attitude. She was a little bit more like standoffish because like she's feeling a certain kind of way. She couldn't just let that go and kind of come together for the event. Now I was curious, what is Longleat? And apparently it's a safari park and Emma and her husband live there. So I thought that was quite interesting because initially they're like, okay, we're going to Longleat. And then it looked like there was like in some of the clips, it looked like, there was people there, like it's a park. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought Longleat was her house. It is. It's a safari park. They have sanctuaries. And we saw giraffes. I'm like, wait a minute. Are they at the zoo? Again, I thought it was Emma's house, but it is Emma's house. And they take care of it. They oversee the operations of it. So I thought that was fascinating and interesting. Can you imagine if you could live at like Disney World and just like oversee it? You know, like, so we have a park here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and it's called Stanley Park. There's only 2 houses within Stanley Park, but those people manage it. Like they will go around at night, make sure that like there's no cars in there. I mean, police will drive around too. It's not a park that's got a gate that closes because the road does lead to a bridge that gets you to the other side of Vancouver, like North and West Vancouver, but you can only drive through it. Like you can't like after a certain point stay in the park and just kind of like enjoy. So hearing about Longleat kind of reminded me of that, and then seeing it, I guess, but they're not like the caretakers of the park, whereas like in Stanley Park in Vancouver, they sort of like manage it. I wouldn't say operationally because, and I'm digressing here, but that's done by the city, but more like maintenance-ish, like they'll see if there's anything that needs to be done, they can report back to the city. So it just kind of reminded me of that. That's all I'm trying to say. We have something similar to that as well. Now, I'm not sure if production framed it this way, but Margo talks a lot of shit on Mark in the confessionals. Just like every other American housewife franchise, think Garcelle in Beverly Hills, or Sutton in Beverly Hills, or Tamara in Orange County, or Shamia, Real Housewives of Atlanta, or Wendy Giselle and Ashley on Potomac. I don't really hear Mark voluntarily talking shit about Margo. In fact, everything he's ever said about her in the confessionals, to be honest, he said it to her face. For example, the ostrich feathers debacle about her feathers when they went to Martha's picnic, right? He said that to her face, but in confessionals, he doesn't really spend the time to talk about her. He does talk about her if he's asked, but he doesn't come to the confessionals, whereas Margo does. Margo will throw jabs in the confessionals. Not saying that she doesn't say it to his face, just say, this is just something that I noticed. Not sure if it's a production thing, an editing thing, but Mark tries not to talk about her, whereas Margo is talking about him. Now, I don't know if it's... Well, actually, I know for sure they're both hurt. And his thing is he ignores it, he deflects. Her thing is she faces it head on like a bull. They're both dealing with a hurt, but in each their own way. Now, Micah genuinely is such a nice person. Even when she reiterates in this particular scenario what Mark had said, she makes it sound nice rather than exaggerated to throw some shade. Think all our other Housewives franchises like Atlanta, Potomac, Beverly Hills, Orange County, oh my God, Miami. Definitely starting to understand there's a British way of doing things, an American way of doing things, and there's etiquette involved, honestly, in both. And I've talked about this with Micah as well before. I think that she's such a good friend. She's such a good person. She doesn't escalate situations. If anything, yes, she'll be like, this is the way that you should kind of transfer information or tell people how people have spoken about you without escalating a situation. You know what I mean? Paraphrasing it in a way that is going to not trigger the person that you're telling, or like I said, I keep using that word, de-escalating it, not making it such an aggressive way or aggravated way, But of course, people love drama, and people say, oh no, I don't want drama in my life. And really that's all they live for. So that's that. Now the crew goes outside in the garden for drinks before they were inside having tea. And I don't want to get too much into it, but you did catch when Margo kind of grabbed the, like in Vancouver, we have these places where we have high tea for brunch, and it comes obviously from the Brits, the British, but you saw how she grabbed it and then they all went and they sat down. Kind of rude considering everyone was just kind of waiting for themselves to get served. But I think that there was just a lot of tension and people didn't know, which this is what happens when it's divided. Like there's no open communication. Emma's, of course, not realizing how severe the situation is. Like she's not thinking that she has to go communicate back and forth amongst the group. She's just all thinking, okay, collectively, when they're ready to serve us, we'll go sit down. And same with Margo. Like Margo doesn't go and ask questions or see. She thinks that everyone's against her at this point and no one's kind of inviting her in. So she just goes and grabs the sweets herself, and it was kind of a bit rude, but it's nothing important that I kind of want to like. I know I just touched upon it, but you caught that because then later the crew goes outside in the garden for drinks, but it's awkward because there's two groups. Now you can feel the tension, and it would be nice if Margo could just put the bullshit to the side to make it fun at least. But hey, these shows enjoy the drama. We need the drama as viewers. It would be fun if they got along, and we say that in hindsight because we know they didn't. But imagine if they just gotten along and there was no drama, and it was always kumbaya moments. We like a little bit of the conflict. So let's create conflict, but let's also have some resolution, because to live in the conflict, it just gets exhausting. Now, I always think about like devil's advocate, like, okay, why does Margo have to be the one that has to kind of be the bigger person or kind of go mesh with the group? Well, if you think about it, even though Mark has tension with her, he still kind of sits with the group. But Margo's the one that kind of situates herself away and I don't know why. She thinks that maybe no one wants her around, but that's not it at all. You can put yourself in the group as well. She chooses not to. She chooses kind of to make it awkward. You could all sit in a big group and you don't have to be necessarily talking to Mark. Let Mark and Kimmy sit together on one side, and you sit on one side. You can be talking to Missy, or if there's a collective joke, everyone can laugh. It doesn't have to be so awkward. But again, she's the American. She kind of makes it known. He's the Brit. He is able to mask it for the time being. They get into it. Margo tells Mark, hey, come over here. Let's have a conversation. There was a lot of back and forth at this point because Missy went and said something to Margo. Margo went back. The game of telephone is being played. This is why I say when you allow things to come in between without taking like a proper break or having a proper conversation, or even silence sometimes, what ends up happening is these stories start forming in your own head, or you're listening to what people say about a situation. Now, later on, we hear that Margo was being fed information by Martha, and I don't think maliciously, and nor do I think Missy's trying to be malicious by giving Margo information as well. I think they're just stuck in the middle, and they think that they're helping, but the way that Margo interprets it is almost as if she's being ambushed or attacked, At this point, Kimmy is yelling at Margo, saying that she's being bitchy and calling her a crybaby bitch. And Kimmy is not British. And I just want to say, Kimmy, that was definitely American and definitely trashy. Don't forget that you're a long lead. But I noticed that when Kimmy drinks a little bit, she forgets where she is or who she is or how to behave. And this is where I feel like, how come Mark or Martha how come they don't tell Kimmy? Okay, calm down. You're crossing the line here. Because if Kimmy wants to enforce rules to Margo or to anybody, be the example. You have these two Americans going back and forth at each other, the American way, calling each other names, crybaby, bitch, blah, blah. And this is where you can really cut through the cultures and see the difference, Margo was not screaming. She literally said, Mark, come over here and talk to me. I didn't hear screaming. Like, you want to hear screaming, I can yell. Okay, I can yell, I can scream. That wasn't screaming. If anything, she had her voice raised so that enough so that Mark could hear, but I don't think it was a yell or a scream. I don't think I've heard Margo yell or scream at all throughout this entire 10 episodes, I love Mark Francis, but at some point he's going to need to face this. I think that he is avoiding it. Kimmy is kind of acting like a drunk, a bit extreme. No one tells her that she's doing something wrong. And if that's the way that she is, great, but it's not really helping the situation, And if you guys are really her friends, this is when you would tell her, okay, Kimmy, let's just stay out of it. And as you saw, Missy did that. When Mark is trying to talk to Margo and she tells him that he's so weird, and if they're not, and that he's a creep because he's trying to grab her hands. And I think it's just, he's affectionate and that's fine. I'm affectionate too. But sometimes you can read the body language of people and you can tell, okay, they're giving off body language that they don't want to be touched. The way that Mark had grabbed for Margo, I feel like it's because they've been so close before. Not close as in distance close, but friendship close, that he didn't think it was impeding on her privacy to just, grab her hands very endearingly and be like, listen, And I think that came from a good place. I'm Persian. We touch all the time. Not inappropriately, but it's to show affection. It's to touch your arm or your shoulder. Hey, how's it going? This is how it's like the love will transform into you. And I feel like the reaction that I'm getting from Mark and the way that he's been behaving this entire way, it's that he's got that kind of heart, So it didn't come from a bad place. It came from an endearing place. And Margo has every right to say, do not touch me. I don't want it right now. I sometimes see when people are getting accosted or having a confrontational conversation, they don't want to be touched. But I feel like in that moment, she knew exactly where it was coming from Mark. And she chose to twist it. She knows Mark is gay. Come on. He wasn't trying to do anything. He was just trying to, sometimes even kids when they're having a tantrum, but then you go and you hug them, then they feel the warmth and the love, and it calms them down. I think that's what he was trying to do, like to just kind of have that energy transfer between the both of them, but she didn't take it that way. And again, as every right as she has to say what she said and that she doesn't want to be touched, she has every right. I feel like they missed the mark there. He, in that one particular moment, was relating to a friendship that he had with Margo. And in that particular moment with Margo, she was completely blocking him off as if she doesn't even know this guy. You know, like they were just missing the mark. If they're not going to meet in the middle to understand how to communicate, or not care to understand how each other is in this moment and how they feel, then I think that they just need to stop talking to each other 100% and move on. Because it's not going to get anywhere. In fact, it's every situation that's been like this, it's just aggravating. It's aggravating the situation. It's irritating them both. It's making them go to a place that's of more anger and more resentment, and it needs to stop, and they need that time apart. It's just like the analogy that I used in another episode. You go to the gym, you get injured, you're not going to keep going back to the gym. You're just going to keep re-injuring the injury, and it might even get worse. You might even need more time in the end to be off. I hate being away from the gym for even 2 weeks. So if I have an injury, especially at my age, I'm getting older, I'm going to make sure that I take that time off so the injury will only last 4 weeks instead of continuously working out with an injury, and then now it's 8 weeks, 12 weeks. They need a break. They need to recover. They need to process. They need to just let it simmer down. Time will tell, and time heals all wounds, and they'll come back together. And Margo shouldn't feel as bad being the force multiplier, bringing the groups together, because, hey, welcome to filming a Bravo reality TV show. Every episode has a force multiplier, and I feel like, or every episode, every franchise, and I feel like for this particular one, because it is Martha and all her friends, like she's friends with all these women and Mark, that it's appropriate for her to be the force multiplier. Now, the next day, they try to start fresh because, again, they're still at long lead, and everyone's telling Margo that the way Mark left was not a good thing because, in the end, Mark ended up leaving. He felt uncomfortable. He didn't want to be confronted. It was not the time nor place. He's just not ready, and that's fine. If people aren't ready, we also have to respect that, too. Just because you're ready, somebody else isn't. The two parties have to come together willingly. And sometimes if someone is more ready than the other, they have to wait until the other person's ready too. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I love my analogies. If two people want to get married, one person wants to get married right away, today, tomorrow, next week, the other person's like, let's just wait a little bit. Unfortunately, you can't force the other person, even though one of them's ready. So the person that's ready will just wait until the other person is ready as well. You know? If it gets to a point where it's never ready, then that's when you determine to walk away. But again, it's not about the marriage or people getting married. It's just the analogy, you know? The person that's ready to go will just have to be patient until the other person is at that same level. It is showing that Mark, like, all this behavior does show that Mark is sensitive. He's probably one of the more sensitive ones out of the group. Mark heard Margo call him a freak. He tells the group, and the group feels bad for him. And in the vehicle, when they're driving to their day trips, he turns quite honest, and I appreciate this about him. And he said that he's been branded a freak his whole life because he's different. He can't even introduce his partner to his family because he's eclectic and different, and he's not the same as everybody else. So let him be a freak, but he'll not allow himself to be nor called that, nor take him to a place where he's felt like that before. And that was sad to hear and really raw. And by the way, where's your partner, Mark? Bring him on the show. Hello, it's a reality TV show. Maybe not yet, but after hearing this, seeing that he's uncomfortable to even bring his partner that he wants to marry around his family, it makes sense why when there was that nude model, he was kind of uncomfortable. You know, he couldn't be his gay self. Mind you, he also has British mannerisms, so the Brits are a little bit more modest, you know, and prude, but it all makes sense. And I think with the reaction that we're getting from Mark, and even though he's the one with the British humor and he jokes and deflects with the humor, and it's because he's the most sensitive. Um, but on the other hand, you have Margo, and she gets emotional too. So clearly, you can tell that the anger that these two hold on to comes from a sadness or a hurt. They were friends at one point. They're both very hurt, hence the strong resistance, the walls up the walls up against each other. And I feel bad for both, to be honest, because once you look at it from that way, it's not coming from a place of anger. It's coming from a place of that they're both hurt, and it's hard for them to get through to the other one in this time. I feel bad for the both of them. Now, hopefully, they both realize that after watching these clips, these episodes, that they're obviously both hurt from this, and that's where all this emotion and reaction is coming from. But Margo ends up having a panic attack, and initially I was surprised that production kept allowing her to film, because just even by looking at it, it does seem like she's really having a panic attack. Like even the breathing with the mic on. This would be a mental health, physical health issue. And right when I said that, I'm thinking about it, I'm writing down this note. Production steps in and finally realizes that she should go back, and they're like, okay, we'll take you back. You need to rest. Because it was just, even I could feel like I started getting anxious through the camera, you know? The girl was bawling her eyes out. It just made no sense that she had to continue to film. Now, after Margo leaves, Lottie and Missy call Micah, who's actually with Mark, Emma, Kimmy, and Martha, and I told them what's going on. Martha's such a nice friend. She goes to call Margo immediately. She's the only one that actually went to call Margo to make sure Margo's okay, but Margo doesn't answer. Initially, if you're not answering, that makes sense. Or I don't know how, for the fact that they've been friends for 20 plus years, I would have just picked up and been like, I'm good, or sent her a text, hey, I had to go. But maybe she's also not in the mindset to really care at that point. She's just trying to, like, you know, be mentally well and breathe. She's exhausted. And this is Margo, exhausted, overwhelmed. Literally, she feels ambushed, ganged up on. And also, like, she's all alone and everyone's just against her. So these are all valid. She's allowed to feel that way. Clearly, her body responded to the emotional feelings that she's having in a physical way. And so I think we just have to kind of give her space in that moment. And they did. And I'm glad that production stepped in and didn't allow her to continue filming. That would have been a huge HR issue. But these are the reasons that literally I don't leave my house. I can just imagine, like, I feel like I would react the same way. I'm bad at taking jokes, especially ones that are at my expense, and then expecting to be okay through it, you know? And then having the pit feeling in your stomach that everyone's against you. Like, it's just, I at this age, I've never put myself in a situation like that in a long time, but I can just imagine how much more of a visceral reaction I would have at this age. It would be much more of an emotional reaction and a sad reaction rather than a angry reaction, you know? There is one part that I don't agree with Mark throughout all this, and he says that Margo comes across as really confident, so why would she care what they think? And yeah, you can be confident, but you can still care what people think, because Mark, she cares because you're not just a stranger to her, you were a friend to her. And she valued that friendship. And I think that's where Mark is missing the mark, no pun intended, of where that hurt and that sadness comes from in Margo. And it's sad that it's at the place that it's gotten to. And on top of that, he didn't make any effort to correct her behavior, regardless of what Missy told her and what Martha told, him. What Missy told him and what Martha told him and what Lottie even told him. He kept going with that behavior. He did, even if he didn't want to have the confrontation, at least minimizing that type of behavior while she's around would have helped. But he also chose not to do that. So he's not 1000% innocent. They're both at fault here, and I'm going to give them 50-50. I love Mark, but he's 50% at fault too. Why not have the conversation? Mark, you're on a reality TV show, my love. This is what would happen. This wouldn't fly on Housewives, and Housewives is Bravo. So I'm sorry, Mark Francis, but you seem like you're in a more reasonable state. You did not have a panic attack, although you did get really vulnerable, but you were able to communicate. For Margo, it just came out as panic, as anxiousness, and it was more of a physical reaction. So I feel like in this moment, you did have the capability to be more reasonable, to at least have the conversation, and you chose not to. That says a lot as well. Now, I do have to say that without Margo there, the group does appear more cohesive. And I feel bad for saying that, because I don't want to make Margo feel like without her, the group has no drama, etc. But it was so divided, and I believe that part of the reason that it was so divided is because she, again, the American way, couldn't really hold back how she was feeling, whereas like Mark could be cordial for the fact of that they're at Longleat and it's Emma's hosting and he didn't want to ruin it. That it is a bit more cohesive that she's gone, because in this particular case, yeah, she was the one that was kind of like holding on to it and not letting it go for just the fact that they were in a group event, group activity. Now, the same thing goes with Margo. She also needs to realize that she's on a reality TV show. So if the conversation wouldn't go to her, for example, after they'd finished the tea and they went out to the garden the day before, she should have gone to them and just sat there. Initially sat there, and then maybe a few moments in be like, Mark, do you want to come have a conversation with me? I think delivery also in a situation like this where everyone's emotions are running quite high and people are defensive, delivery also helps. Instead of like, come here, talk to me. You know, she could have just, hey, Mark, whispered in his ear, or like, you know, gone and sat in a group setting and then, hey, Mark, do you want to go have a conversation? Really, you know, something. And coming from me, who's somebody that I was like, I'm never going to bow down and talk to people how they want me to talk, because I'm not going to succumb to their wishes, like, because I don't want to do that. But there is a way to get what you want. And it starts by how you speak. Even me with my thick, raspy voice, I can come off as really mean or aggressive, or I can just be really kind. And I realize that for me, it's not my voice that I need to change. Like, a lot of people will just change their voice and they can say, fuck you, you little asshole, and with a really soft voice that works for them. But for me, it's the words that I choose. Instead of being like, yo, get over here, I want to have a conversation. Hey, baby, do you mind if we just go over there and have a quick conversation? Because I just don't want to talk for the group. Would that be okay? And if not, that's totally cool. We'll just do it another time. There's ways that you can speak to people, you know? Anyways, wow, that was a little too like soft for me. I like to enunciate and I like to speak and I like to use my voice. I'm Persian. A lot of women, Persian women especially, don't get to use their voices. So I'm going to make sure that I use mine accordingly and appropriately, but still use my voice. Now, when they're all done Longleat and everything's all said and done, Mika goes to visit Margo to see how she's doing. Margo explains to Micah. God, why did I say Mika? I graduated high school with a Mika. So Micah goes to visit Margo to see how she's doing. And Margo explains that she's never been in a situation like that before. And when the panic, this is the odd thing that I thought that she said, that when the panic attack was coming on, all she could see was Martha. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, wait a minute, how the hell did poor Martha get dragged into this? But again, Margo's feelings are valid, and this is what Margo said. She says that she was seeing Martha because Martha wasn't really supporting her to her face. Now, I can't control what people see when they're having a panic attack, when they're throwing up, when they're pooping, when they're angry, when they're sad. I don't know what comes to their mind. But for Margo, she's saying that it was Martha. And she says that behind her back, Martha's really supportive and tells everyone Margo means well and you shouldn't do this to her and give her a chance. But when it's to Margo's face, which I feel Margo deems more important, she's criticizing how she moves and how she reacts. And I'm kind of surprised that Martha was the face that she saw in those moments of pure panic, because it's almost like she's saying like that drove her to more panic mode. Poor Martha. She even admitted that she should have been involved. Again, she's a force multiplier. Girl, do you think you're on a reality TV show? I know that Margo feels extremely bullied and ganged up on, etc. I think that reaction and seeing Martha in that moment was because Martha is the closest to her out of that group. And I don't think it's because I think she just said it wrong. And this is just my opinion. And we're allowed to judge these shows, or else why go on a reality TV show if you don't want to be judged? I think that she feels like Martha's not there for her in that moment like she should be. Like, instead she's with the opposing group. And so Margo therefore feels way more alone, and hence the panic. Like, she feels like, okay, I don't even have my best friend, the one that I've known the longest. What does this mean for me in this moment? And that's what probably aggravated the panic attack even more. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't think that in that moment she's seeing Martha's face and be like, "This is all your fault, you cunty bitch. Like, you're the one that did this to me." But I don't think it was that. I think that she said that, but I think that she just articulated it wrong. And again, that's my opinion. I think she just felt like, great, I've lost everybody, including Martha. And when I really needed her the most, she's off with the other group. Who knows what they're saying about me? Again, Amanda Francis on Beverly Hills said it best. The body gave a physical reaction to the mental and emotional state that she was in. And that's just how it is. Like, something else that even Margo couldn't control, you know? But these are things that you become self-aware of and that you should not ignore. And you shouldn't say, oh, I can't believe I reacted that way. I can't believe that I'm an adult. Why did I let it get to me? You're an adult. You're human. You have feelings. It shows that you are not cold-hearted. So if anything, coming out of this, I kind of like Margo and Mark even more, because you see that they're so human and they allow themselves to get vulnerable, and therefore their vulnerability shows us authenticity as the audience and also relatability. If we can't relate to them, we're not watching them, you know? I know Micah did bring up a good point after Margo says that she felt extremely bullied and ganged up on. She says that if everyone tells you that you're doing something wrong, you should perhaps just take that into consideration. She said, see how she didn't say, you should be listening to us, listen to what we have to say. No, she said, just take it into consideration. Why am I getting 6, 7 people telling me the same thing? Are they seeing something that I can't see? It's not saying write it in stone, poke your finger, let your finger bleed out and write it in blood. No, just have that thought. Just be open to the thought. I'm not dismissing how Margo feels at all either. And I feel like she's allowed to have her feelings, especially after seeing that reaction. Yes, of course, she's allowed to have her feelings. Everyone's allowed to have their feelings and it's valid. But I feel like she should lead with an apology if she expects an apology. Okay? Because she's the one who wants to squash the beef. It seems like Mark doesn't really care to in this moment. So if Mark doesn't want to, that's fine. But you want to, regardless if you get an apology back, Margo, you should just go in there, take accountability for what you've done, said, take that onus so that you are able to heal, because you're the one that had the really strong reaction to everything that's going on. And, you know, recovery and healing starts with forgiving, you know? So forgive, don't forget, but do it for yourself, because that's what you're going to need to get your body and your mind and spirit back into a better place. Mark can deal with his things on his own. This is just, I'm saying Margo because the situation with Margo and Micah was right in front of our face. They also do flashbacks. Production does flashbacks, and she never used the word freak. Mark was really triggered by the word freak. She did say it was creepy. How, like, he tried to touch her and whatnot. Not freak. Now, we're going to have differing opinions here. People could say, well, it could mean the same thing. From the explanation that Mark had given us was that he'd been called specifically a freak, not a creep. I think creep is different. Creep would be like someone's like looking in your bedroom when you're trying to sleep and like they're like, you know, a peeping Tom. That's creepy, you know, or like a paranormal activity. That's creepy. Someone that makes you feel uneasy. But a freak is someone that would be different. Regardless of what it means, they're both names that obviously you don't want to be called or used. But I wonder what the group will think collectively when they look back and realize that the word was completely wrong in the first place. And Margo got crucified for using the wrong word. And she even said at one point, yeah, you said that word, because poor girl was probably like tossed in this chaos. And she was like, oh my God, if I said it, if everyone heard it. And she's not dismissing how Mark felt or that Mark heard a certain word come out of her mouth. She took accountability for the wrong word. But hey, you know, it happens. Margo's stepsons also asked her how she was doing, which was so sweet. The boys are only there for the summer, but they will be going back to America for school. And I think it's kind of crazy how Margo and her husband live in completely 2 different countries and they have to go back and forth. I know that people, my friends that are married, and the husband or the wife takes off for vacation and then, or not vacation, sorry, for work, a few weeks out of the month and come back, they have the best relationships. But out of the country is like a whole another ballgame, you know? So we're getting close to the end of the episode, and a couple things I want to point out. Mike is hosting an event. It's for etiquette, and Mark Francis and Missy show up to support her. And right before it begins, Mark Francis breaks down to Missy to a point that they both get up and have to leave, and like Mark's crying. So now this is Mark's visceral reaction to this. Margo had the panic attack. Mark is having this crying session. This also proves to me that Mark is sensitive, and that's okay. I don't know why they want to show that they're not as sensitive or they're not as hurt by it. If it's coming up like this, they need to acknowledge it and just, at least acknowledge it, It's okay to be vulnerable and honest about your feelings, especially when you guys were friends. Like, that's okay. I don't think Mark is upset about what Margo called him, although in this particular interaction and with Missy there, he's saying, like, I don't like how that situation made me feel. Again, the way that I dissected it is Mark is upset because he thought Margo was a friend. And in this moment, she's committed to misunderstanding him. Not understanding that he deflects with humor, not even understanding his sense of humor, not understanding that he's not trying to be malicious, he's just teasing her. This is the way that he is. And then on the other side, I think that Margo didn't just have a panic attack because of Mark or seeing Martha's face when she's having it. Margo's tears and panic and that visceral reaction came from not being heard or seen by people who she called her friend. In particular, Mark, who was a friend of hers, and perhaps Martha, who she thought would be there for her ride or die, considering the amount of time that they've known each other. This is where I think both the visceral reactions are coming from. So it goes a little bit more deeper than they said. And this is just the way that I dissected it. On the other hand, I love that both Margo and Mark got vulnerable and they opened up because we want to see this. We want to relate and understand and even relate even more. And these shows, these characters, they don't do well if the viewers or the audience is unable to relate to them or understand them. We'll just stop watching because we're like, what? This makes no sense. How can this be? Margo does reach out. When Michael was over, they sent a nice text to Mark. So she reaches out to Mark so that they can meet. And they do meet face to face after, again, Micah had helped Margo tone down her delivery in the text message. It was going good, but I feel like this is where it fumbled because initially Margo did apologize for everything. And Mark brings up that she has narcissistic tendencies. It's like, Mark, it was going so well. This is when you have to take that British thing that you were talking about and whoosh. Because Mark came into the meeting being mad at her for calling him a freak. And again, we've covered this. She actually said creepy. And I agreed with Marco when she said that she apologized. She took responsibility for her part and how she played and that she was a bad friend. While Mark, instead of accepting the apology or even saying, you know what, thank you for saying that, I've been waiting for you to say that, he doubled down and then proceeded to call her a narcissist or having narcissistic tendencies. Which now in turn makes Margo mad again and resulted in Mark walking off. So back to what we've suspected from the beginning, that Margo was willing to squash the beef, but Mark is still holding on to something. And what did I say earlier? Both parties got to be ready. You can't force them into something. Okay? So Mark shouldn't have said that. Mark should have just said, thank you very much. When I'm ready to discuss this further or to kind of rekindle our friendship or to get a little bit closer, or we'll just see how things go, something like that. But obviously he had to let things off his chest. And he said that she had narcissistic tendencies, and in turn this made her mad. And I feel in this case, she should just, after he said that, she's like, you know what? I've said my piece. Let him have his feelings. Those are valid because, Margo, you had your feelings and those were valid as well. And you had no problem telling him that he was creepy and etc. So now he's allowed to tell you that you have narcissistic tendencies. It's not going to solve anything, unfortunately, but just let him have that. Okay? But yet they both get easily triggered. And Mark walked off. So like I said, he's still holding on to anger. He's not ready to clear the air. So in situations like this, you give it space to breathe. They both need space to breathe. This all comes from a place of hurt. Both of them. Mark was obviously hurt from something that Margo had done. And even before the castle, and before she used the word creep or freak, whatever the freaking stupid word that she used, And Margo was still easily triggered over Mark and what he does to her because he's not seeing her or listening to what she's actually saying. He didn't really hear the apology. He kind of, I feel, came in with the intention of saying what he had to say and getting it off his chest, because I don't even think I heard him say, okay, well, thank you for that. He said, okay, well, in the American Canadian way, they're like, well, you just say you're sorry and you don't lead with buts. And sometimes it's really hard to get apologies out of people, especially people that don't like to apologize. So you just take what you can. But with that being said, Mark had feelings that he had to get off his chest. And now let's reverse the roles. If Margo wants to be heard and seen by Mark, maybe she should hear and see Mark as well. I just think it's like, when I look at it from the position that I'm in, it's just such a big misunderstanding. But you can tell that it's both coming from a place of hurt, and that these two friends kind of expected more of each other and had higher expectations from the other. And that wasn't met. So now they're in this position where they're both hurt. No one's listening to each other. Nothing's getting resolved. So from this point forward, we need a little bit of a break. Okay. They're both very sensitive and they're both very emotional, and typically people with the biggest personalities are. And I feel like everyone on this planet has degrees of emotional sensitivity. What it takes to get them there is based on the individual. It's an individual leverage, or it's an individual balance, or it's an individual thing. I don't know how to say it. It's an individual gauge of what gets you to that place where you're completely emotionally sensitive. But every single person has it. And I find, in my almost 42 years of life, that the bigger the personality, the narrower that space is to handle certain dramatic situations before it really triggers you emotionally. And that's what we see with Mark and Margo. So it was really interesting to break down that friendship. I loved it. I loved to analyze it, psychoanalyze it. It was great. As we're wrapping up the season and the episode, it's Lottie and Josh's last fashion show. It's their last fashion show before the baby. Lottie walks into Josh. It's his pieces. I'm assuming that it's the year-end event as well. And I'm really happy for Lottie, especially considering that her father died earlier in the season before the baby was born. That was sad. But when it comes to her, I'm still unsure about how I feel about her. I feel like her and Missy were kind of like fillers in the show. They didn't really bring much to the show, but at the same time, they were helpful in the conversations that triggered, I guess, the conflict between both Margo and Mark. Now, after the fashion show, Margo and Martha sit down because they needed to. Apparently, Martha told the group that she and Margo had exchanged some words via text message, and then shortly after that, Margo blocked her. Okay. Now, to Margo's surprise, because again, Margo doesn't yell. She walks in really kind of like solemn and very like, even keeled. Martha actually tells off Margo. Martha says since Margo has returned from the US, she's different. She's got a bit of an attitude, some arrogance to her. And Margo says that Martha is the one who threw fuel on the fire. At least that's what she thinks. Because Margo said that she would call her and tell her things that they were saying behind her back. And that Margo would bring back the information from the group, etc. And it just sort of amplified the feelings that Margo already had. And it kind of tossed more fuel to the fire, like she was egging her on. And then she pointed out that Margo was actually the one who originally talked shit about her velvet jumpsuit. And then, therefore, Martha's her best friend. And Martha talking shit about her outfit then allowed people that weren't as close to her, but still her friends, such as Mark Francis and Kimmy, to now talk about her jumpsuit. So it spiraled all the others to follow suit. Martha points out that Margo has stirred beef amongst the entire crew of friends, which are Martha's. She's friends with them too. And that, when she was saying that, production did not fall short of showing all the clips of Margo literally starting shit or being shady with every single person in the group. It started with Dara, saying that she heard that Dara was a madam. And then something to do, I think, with Kimmy Kimmy going and talking shit about Missy's sad story about her brother that, got shot and killed. And then the whole Mark Francis situation. I don't think Margo does it intentionally. I think Margo is just the pot stirrer. She's the Tamara Judge of the group, Um, and she can't help that she's going to repeat things. So you have two options. You either don't tell her anything anymore, or you do and you just hope for the best. But I think that Martha thinks that Margo wants her to drop everybody for her and be like, it's just me and Margo against the entire group. And Martha's not willing to do that because those are also her friends as well. And I feel bad for Martha. She's in a tough situation. She's known everybody, especially Margo, the longest, but she's not gonna, ditch one friend group for another friend group. It's not her place anyways. She's not the person with the problem with everybody. Whoever has a problem with each other should be the ones that should deal with it and, like adults, talk it out. Now, it did end with saying that because Margo wanted to work on things, Martha was like, I don't know, right now I need a break. They took a break from each other, and then now they're talking again, which is exactly what I said about Mark and Margo. They need a break from each other. They need to just let things air out. Let it not become as big of a situation. Every day that you sleep on it and you wake up again and, you wake up to a fresh, brand new day, it becomes less and less. The emotions become less, and you just sort of learn to live with it, and then you're able to tackle it with a more clear mind at a later point. So it's sad that a friendship is lost, but I don't think it's going to be lost forever. I think it's just initially. I think also they're still also, Margo and Mark were friends, but they're also still figuring each other out as friends. They haven't been friends for a long time like Martha and Margo have, but they're getting to know each other as friends. And sometimes when you're getting to know the other person, things will happen. I know that happens with me and my closest friend. Sometimes I learn things about her that just trigger the shit out of me, but we talk through it because it's a friendship that I want to keep. Or else my default is to just be like, fuck this. I don't need this. And it's easy for me to walk away. It's hard for me to actually work on the relationship. It's very easy for me to walk away from the relationship. So how much of the friendship you want to salvage, it just comes down to the individual and collectively the two that are in, or 3 or 4 that are fighting, right? So it was great. I can't believe I got so deep just watching that show, but it's really like that. I love to reflect that way on the shows and just kind of play them back and be like, wow, people really do behave like this. Because sometimes when you can look at it from the outside view, as an outsider that's not involved, you can really either, it makes you aware of your own habits or people that you know that are similar, and perhaps how to work things out in the future if that were to ever happen. I'm sad that the episode and the season has ended. That was just a 10 episode first season. Hopefully there's a reunion. We'll see. But that's the end of Ladies of London, the new reign. It's kind of making me, and I don't have the time, or else honestly I would, but kind of go back and see how it was when Caroline Stanbury was on, because apparently when Caroline Stanbury was on it got canceled, that one. So I can't imagine this one getting canceled, but I'm excited to see what the new season will bring. So with that being said, pursuers, that is it for our Ladies of London. Please remember to follow, like, share, subscribe, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify podcasts. You can find me on socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, The Pursuit of Happiness, pod or podcast. You can find me there. All my socials, all the websites, all the information that you can get a hold of me if you want to send me a DM or just chat about what's going on, or in the show notes. Come back. We have so many more episodes to cover. I'm going to do another question episode probably tomorrow where I answer some of the pursuer questions that I've gotten. And then I will resume catching up on the shows as I was traveling and I moved countries. And now that I'm settled, I'm able to catch up on the shows. We still have to do Atlanta. We still have to do Rhode Island and Summer House in the Valley. Oh my God, I'm so behind. I'm going to probably do 1 show per episode, just as I like to catch up, and then eventually go back to having 2 or 3 shows per episode. With that being said, love you all, pursuers. Thank you so much for following. Thank you so much for keeping up, and hopefully you guys are loving this just as much as I am. Have a good night, pursuers.